Hello, my name is Pastor Taylor Necochea. Thank you for joining us for our virtual Safe Sanctuary training. It is 2024, and this policy was approved and accepted in the fall of 2022. So let's get into it. This is our Safe Sanctuary policy. This is what it looks like. It'll say Princeton or Kingston Methodist Church Safe Sanctuary Policy. And it outlines a couple of things. It has our screening and selection of volunteers, which if you are a volunteer, you know that this is part of the process, but there's more to the process to become a volunteer. We have our supervision and procedures. So this is really the main part of this training, talking about our policies and procedures that help keep people safe. We have training and education, which is what you're doing right now, part of what you're doing right now. We have reporting and we have responding. And so we're going to go through each one of those things in our training today. And so if you have that document that I just saw, that I just showed you, please feel free to pull that up, print it out, so you can circle things, make marks, anything that you need to do. Before we get started into our policies and procedures, why Safe Sanctuary? Well, for one, the conference tells us that this is important, and that is a beautiful and a wonderful thing, and I'm grateful for that. The conference knows, really the denomination of the United Methodist Church knows how important it is to keep our children, our youth, and our vulnerable adults safe, so that our conference has said that this is an expectation for all churches. This is not optional. And so a lot of this is something that we worked on with the conference. And so these are not just our policies or our opinions on what safety looks like. This is people who are trained in this helping us figure out what the best way is for us to do ministry. Another reason why, other than we are told to, is that it aligns with our vision, mission, and values. And this is important, right? So we believe at Princeton and Kingston UMC that we exist to create a gracious, a restorative, a healing place, a place that helps us find liberation, a place that helps us live into the fullness of the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. Those are just some of the phrases that we have in our mission and vision statements. And in order to do that, we have to keep people safe. We have to be realistic about the world, be realistic that there is harm in the world that happens. There are evils in the world, and that we want no part of that. And so that can be stressful and scary. And even maybe hearing this, maybe some anxiety is coming up in you. But I think that as much as we possibly can follow the Safe Sanctuary policy, and also be constantly interrogating how to keep each other safe and how to keep our young ones safe as well, is what we're called to do. And so, and I will walk us through this. All right. So as we begin, I want you to be aware that we're going to talk about some hard things. And so if you are someone who has experienced abuse or neglect or harm from the church in some way, or harm in your childhood, or even as an adult, or know someone who has, and maybe perhaps this is a triggering topic for you, I want you to take care of yourself during this training. I want you to really take it slow, feel free to pause. You don't have to watch this all at once. And if this is something that is really, really hard for you to think and talk about, I want you to reach out to myself or your pastor to do this together, and to maybe do this in a different way if you need to, or to maybe watch this with your pastor, watch this with a safe person. And so don't feel like you need to rush through this or get this done right away. This can be a process that in itself is gracious and restorative to you. And so please take care of yourself as we begin this. All right. So as we keep going, what even is our Safe Sanctuary policy? That's an amazing question. So we have, of course, this Safe Sanctuary policy right here. Looks like this. And in the Safe Sanctuary policy, we have 5 main things outlined. So if you have that pulled up, I invite you to pull up that document that I just showed you and have it printed out or on your screen as 5 things. You'll see on the very first page as 5 things. So it's screening and selection of volunteers. So who is even allowed to work with our children and youth? So it details that, and that's something that I work with that section very closely in recruiting volunteers. Two, supervision and procedures. So once you're a volunteer or a staff member in this ministry, what are the certain regulations and policies that we have in place? Three is training and education, and so this is part of that. Having this safe sanctuary training every 2 years is part of our training education, as well as other trainings. You'll know that if you're beginning your volunteer process right now, you'll know that this is not the only video that you're probably going to be watching over the next couple weeks. So there's that as well, detailed in there, and reporting abuse and responding. And so I want you to know that through all of these 5 steps that your pastors are here to work with you on this. This is not something that I need you to memorize. This is not something that I need you to feel like it's okay for you to have questions about this, but this is something that I want you to be very familiar with. And it's something that I want you to reference and utilize as much as you can. But just know that your pastors are here for you with all of this to help you if God forbid something abuse does happen, and we get to the 4 and 5 reporting and responding, your pastors will work with you on that. But it is important for you to be aware of what those steps are. Okay. So during our Safe Sanctuary training, we're talking about children, youth, and vulnerable adults. And a very common question that I get when I do trainings like this is, what is a vulnerable adult? Like, and that's an amazing question. In some ways, it's kind of a fluid word, but the US Department of Justice defines a vulnerable adult as someone who has a developmental disability, impairment due to aging, or someone who struggles to meet their own basic needs. So this is like shelter or food. So someone who is vulnerable in that sense, or an adult who is, for whatever reason, is unable to protect themselves from abuse, neglect, exploitation. And so there's lots of ways that can make someone a vulnerable adult. I know it can be difficult to maybe you're working with someone and you don't even know that they're a vulnerable adult because you don't know their whole story. But if you ever get a sense that maybe they have these vulnerabilities, please tell your pastor, ask your pastor. Maybe your pastor knows a little bit more about how to help them. And so this is a little bit different than a child or a youth, where we have this very specific what that means. It's 18 years or younger. So being a vulnerable adult is a little bit more fluid and is a little bit harder to define. But it is important for us to be familiar with what a vulnerable adult is and who that is. So let's begin by talking about ministry with vulnerable adults. Because even though most of you who are watching this video are probably working with children and youth, it is still important that we are familiar with giving the best care that we can to vulnerable adults and what our procedures are for that. And again, always just ask your pastor if you have questions. You'll hear me say that probably lots of times during this video. So let's talk about ministry of vulnerable adults. So abuse and neglect of older persons includes several categories and acts or missions generally referred to as abuse, neglect, exploitation, and abandonment. And I'll let you read some of the potential signs or abuse or neglect, but a lot of these will include one, if someone tells you that they've been abused or neglected, that's a very important sign. So sometimes we're not always reading these signs. Sometimes they're telling us that they're abused or neglected. Someone who maybe their caregiver is unstable, maybe abuses alcohol. So whoever they're dependent on, maybe they don't have the right medical care, they're under medicated, maybe they are not being given water or food adequately, or maybe they aren't clean clothes or bedding, they're not being taken care of in that way. Or someone who has a history of violence in their household or violence with the people that they're living with. And so also another sign is someone who is not able to talk to other people, who's not able to have visitors or have communication with others. So these are all, this is not the only signs of what makes a vulnerable adult or the only signs that a vulnerable adult is being abused or neglected. Again, this is a short list. This is the working list, but these are some of the basic signs that you can just start to think through and look out for during your ministry. Okay, so let's now talk about children and youth. So it's a little bit easier to define a child. So this is a person under the age of 18. And child abuse in the state of New Jersey is defined as the physical, sexual, or emotional harm or risk of harm to a child, a person under the age of 18, caused by their caregiver, so their parent, their guardian, whoever that person, that adult is acting as their caregiver. So that's abuse. Neglect is when this caregiver person, this parent or guardian, does not provide proper supervision, food, clothing, water, shelter, even education or medical needs, even though they are financially able or assisted in some way to do so. And so the guardian or parent has the ability to care for their child, but is neglecting to do so. Um, that is what child neglect is. Let's talk about some signs of child abuse. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a working list. And if you want to dive deeper into these lists, I'm happy to share resources with you. And it is important that a single sign, this is true for both vulnerable adults and children and youth, does not necessarily mean that abuse has occurred or neglect has occurred, but one sign or multiple signs that we're about to talk through is a prompt for us that we should look closely into the situation. And so any one of these signs, even if there's just one sign, or even if you're just unsure, you should always, always, always tell your pastor. Please always tell me that you see something going on. So let's talk about some of the signs. So again, just like adults, if the child or youth reports sexual or physical abuse, that's a sign, and we want to believe those people when they tell us those things. And so if the child reports that, you want to tell your pastor right away, and we'll go through reporting in just a minute. If they have unexplained bruising, so face or torso or thighs, often in various stages of healing, that's a sign that we want to have our red flags out and look into this a little bit further. Burns or fractures, fear of going home or fear of parents. Again, we want to look at multiple signs. So that alone, the fear of going home or fear of parents isn't necessarily, doesn't prove that abuse has happened, but it is a red flag, and we want to look into that more. Consistent hunger, and so this is like if they're stealing food, they're not just they skipped breakfast, but they're stealing food or hoarding food. That's a flag that we want to raise. If they have pretty consistent unattended medical needs, if their contact with other children is really limited, and it's some they're not allowed to be with other children or youth their age, and their caregiver prevents them from that. If the child has alcohol abuse, or another sign is that if the adult or caregiver in that child's life is looking to that child for the care, attention, and satisfaction of emotional needs. So these are all some signs of child abuse that we want to just begin to be aware of. So I think a really important thing when talking about youth, specifically teenagers, but goes for all children and adults, is remaining aware of what that relationship is like, what you as the adult, what your relationship is like with the youth, and also being aware of what other adults' relationships are with that youth. And so in order to prevent abuse and to stop abuse, we want to be aware of some of the distinctive markers of grooming. And so we're going to go through that now. So according to the National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children, there are 7 distinct steps in grooming a young person for abuse. So this is an adult with another young person. And so I think that we're going to go through this. I think this is helpful, one, so we can look at other adults and make sure that we're all having a healthy relationship, but also helps us know how to have that relationship with that youth, and making sure that we are always acting appropriately, even if our intentions are always the best. We want to make sure that we are acting appropriately. So 1, targeting the victim. So Abusers will often choose a vulnerable child. So we've talked a little bit about vulnerability, but in different ways, a child can be vulnerable, socially vulnerable, physically vulnerable, but they're an easy target. The abuser will also use their position. So in a ministry setting, they have power due to age, expertise, or maybe they're presenting themselves as someone who gets you. Like, I'm the only person who really understands what you're going through. It's words like that. They will then gain trust. So this happens by, giving gifts only to that child consistently, giving them one-on-one attention that is more than appropriate, maybe in-person or online compliments or messages, or they have a very specific connection to gain that child's trust. The abuser will then fulfill a need. They will be that listening ear. Again, that goes back to their vulnerability. So they will, locate what that vulnerability is, and emphasize that they are the only ones who will get them or have empathy for them. And your parents don't get you, your friends don't get you, your pastor doesn't understand you. Only I know you, and only I know what you're going through and where you're coming from. So things like that is a begins to have signs of grooming. And then lastly, the last three are, they will then isolate. So once you've gained the trust and that inappropriate relationship has been initiated, they will then cut off the victim, the child, from their friends and family. And this will also include like secret interactions, like don't tell, like let's meet up. So things like that. And into the child, they've wow, someone finally gets me, and this person loves me, and so it's clearly an inappropriate relationship, but they have very well convinced the child that it's not. They also want to maintain control, and so maybe they'll have threats, or they will guilt the youth or the child to keep this relationship secret and to keep it maintained. And the end goal is to exploit the child in some way. And so once they have gone through these steps and progressed into that, and successfully groomed them, they now are able to exploit them. And so these are things that we really want to be aware of. We really want to be aware about how we interact with our youth, how our other leaders interact with our youth. This is something that I'm thinking of often, just to be sure about how we're all maintaining a healthy relationship with our youth. And so this is just something to think about and consider. And if you ever are feeling like, I'm not so sure about that adult, I'm not so sure about that adult's relationship with that one child, just tell your pastor. I think I'm going to keep saying that over and over and over again, but tell your pastor, tell your pastor, tell your pastor, or tell someone that is safe and in a leadership position that can help you maybe talk through that scenario and look into that a little bit more. I think it's always good if we have little inklings, little nervousness around a situation, or the thoughts. I think it's always good to share those thoughts with someone else. Don't ever keep those to yourself. Even if you think it's going to sound strange or silly or dramatic when you say it out loud, that's okay. Let's just embrace that. And the best thing to do, the best policy, is just to continue to share that with your pastor and to share that with others who will help you work through that and investigate if needed. Okay. This is so much information. What can I do to help? That is a great question. What you can do to help is always stay educated. So you're doing that right now. You're staying educated on the signs of abuse and neglect. You can continue to take this training every 2 years or more than that. Always ask questions. So if you're like, I just took that training a month ago, but I always forgot, or I have questions about this one thing or this one relationship, always ask questions. Just always ask your pastor. We're happy to help you and work through this with you. I think that is what creates this healthy relationship between the volunteers and the staff and the safe sanctuary policies, that we're always in conversation about the safe sanctuary policy. Always immediately report suspected harm to your pastor or to your leadership board. So currently right now that's Sonia and Iona. If you don't know who your leadership board is currently, you can ask your pastor and they'll let you know, but always report immediately. Do not wait to report. And always lovingly hold each other accountable for maintaining the policy and procedures. And so if you see, that we're not upholding these policies and procedures that we're going to talk about, please make note of that and say, hey, like, this isn't aligned with our safe sanctuary policy. That will be fully welcomed for us. Okay, so let's talk about those. Now we talked about some signs of abuse. Now let's talk about the boundaries that we have to keep our safety in place. Okay, so who can volunteer with youth? This is a great question, especially if you are someone who's watching this training and you are volunteering with youth. So one of the, I think the rules that is that I come across the most is that you must be a regular attendee of the church for 6 months before you're allowed to work with children and youth. This happens all the time because, we have a new person and they want to get involved right away, and that's awesome, but they have to wait 6 months because we need to get to know them a little bit more. They need to be invested in our community before they're working with our most vulnerable people, and that's fine. They need to complete the volunteer application with 2 references. And so I or Tyler calls all those references and checks all those references. And so that's something that you probably have already done. And if not, I'm happy to walk you through those steps. You also will undergo a background check, and this is paid by the church. And you will also agree to abide by the safe sanctuary policy and procedures. The background check reruns every 3 years. And so we're constantly making sure those are up to date. And you must complete the sexual abuse awareness training every 2 years. So that is through Ministry Safe. If you haven't done that before, we'll walk you through that process. It's an online training. It takes about an hour, but that's also required by the conference. And then all of the volunteer applications must be reviewed by the leadership board chair and the supervisor of the volunteer and the lead pastor. So currently at PUMC, that would be myself, Jenny, and Iona would have to read through and approve. So we have multiple eyes on these volunteer applications, which is a good and wonderful policy that we have. So we were not going to go through every single policy that's in the Safe Sanctuary policy, but we're going to go through the ones that you're going to come across the most. I think the one that I think is the most important and also the most challenging is the 2 adult rule. And so this means that in every classroom, every confirmation class, every nursery, there must be 2 adults. 2 adults that have gone through Safe Sanctuary training, have gone through the application process, and are approved volunteers. There has to be 2 people. So also the rule of 3. And so this is that you're never alone with the child. And so it's either you and another adult and a child, or it's you and 2 children. This is a rule for like when we're walking in the hallways, or we're en route to the classroom, or we're walking to the bathroom really quick. You never want to be just one-on-one with the child, because we want to maintain the 2 adult rule as much as possible. This is a very, very important rule, but there are times where, you have to walk someone somewhere really briefly. And so you always want to make sure you're in a group of 3 and you're never just one-on-one with a child if you can't have another adult with you. But for 99.9% of the time, you should have 2 adults with you, except for those scenarios where you're in hallways and within earshot of other adults as well. The 5-year older rule is another rule. This pertains mostly to some of our young adults or our teens. So you have to be 5 years older than the people that you're supervising. And so if you are a freshman in college and you want to work with middle schoolers or high schoolers, you probably can't. You have to be 5 years older than the oldest child. But if you're a senior in high school and you want to work in the nursery, that's awesome, because you're 5 years older. You might not count as one of the adults. There has to be 2 other adults in the room if you're 17 and you're a senior in high school, but you're 5 years older than at least 5 years older than the 2-year-olds. So you can work in the nursery, and that happens all the time. So another one is our open door policy. And so this is something that the clergy work with a lot. This is a policy that we use, but it's also something if you're a confirmation mentor that you'll use. So this is that you want to be within earshot and eyesight of other adults. So if I am working with a confirmand, so an eighth grader, I want to make sure that my door is open if I'm in my office, and that there's another adult right outside the room. Or I'm at a coffee shop with other adults, or I'm, wherever, but I'm never just in my office, door closed with a child in my office. And so it's just an open door policy. So this is important as well. If I was having an online meeting with a teenager, I would just make sure that my door is still open and I'm not wearing my AirPods. It's Tyler, our office manager, can hear what is happening. And I would ask that the parent of the child was also in earshot of that conversation. So that helps us keep our children safe. If you're working in the nursery, this is a procedure that's important for you. In order to change diapers, you must have written consent from the parent. So I make sure you have this in our when they fill out the forms to register, our registration forms. I have a part that says you give permission to change diaper or help the child go to the bathroom if they're at the age to do that. So that counts as written consent if they've checked yes to that. And so those will be printed in the nursery for you, and you can always ask me or go on to Breeze to check. But the 2 adult rule still matters when changing a diaper. So if you are 2 people in the nursery and one of them's changing the diaper, I would just make sure that the other adult is watching that interaction happening as well. And the diaper change must be logged in the diaper log, and it also must be communicated to the parent verbally. Bathroom procedures, this matters mostly for children under the age of 7. If they're under the age of 7, they do need to be escorted to the bathroom by a staff member or volunteer. I don't go into the bathroom with them, but I do make sure that there's not another adult in the bathroom. So usually I'll go into the bathroom, I'll open the bathroom door before, make sure there's no other adult in there, and then I'll let them go in. This is pretty easy because we put the children's classrooms across from the bathroom, so I'm never far away from the classroom. So that makes it easy. This is a difficult rule to enforce because kids at school know that they can just get up and go to the they have to ask their teacher, but they're not used to being escorted to the bathroom at school. And so this is a different kind of policy than they're used to. But it is one that we need to keep in place. All right, so let's talk about reporting abuse. If you suspect abuse or you know that someone has been abused or neglected, you have to report it. You are a mandatory reporter. You have to report it. So state law requires anyone who has knowledge or suspicion of a child that has been abused or neglected must report it immediately to New Jersey's Child Protection and Permanency Services. So if you suspect abuse, we need to report it right away. You can report it or your pastor can report it. If the abuser is someone who is a volunteer or suspected abuser, as someone who is in the ministry setting, they need to be immediately removed from the ministry setting. So if it's a volunteer or someone working with children at the church, they immediately are not a volunteer anymore. This is the number in under B to contact. So 1-877-NJ abuse. Or if the child is in immediate danger, obviously call 911. You have to report the incident immediately to the staff person responsible for sponsoring the activity. And so myself or Jenny is fine. And we will then contact the lead pastor once we've done some of that reporting, who will then contact the leadership board or SBRC chair and the DS. And so multiple people are getting involved, but we're going to report it first as we're bringing those people in. And I will help you do that if it comes to that. So please contact me immediately. or report yourself immediately. Yeah. If the abuse does take place during a church-sponsored event, there are certain policies and procedures, including looping in the DS that we have to do. And so your pastor will help you walk you through that, but it is important for you to know. And then there is an incident form for you to fill out, or the staff person to fill out to report the abuse, and just to write down that we reported it and we shared it with the appropriate people. And it's at the end of your safe sanctuary policy. It's a helpful checklist too, to help remind us what the procedures actually are. Okay. So that's the incident report at the very end of your, show you. It's right here. So this is the incident report. So after fill this all out, I will help you. It's just like who's notified and when. And so this is really, really, really important that we do this well and immediately. There should be no waiting. Okay. And when in doubt, just ask a pastor if this report should be used. So this obviously is for abuse, but even if there's an injury that happens, this should be written down. If you know, a second grader falls and hurts their arm, you know, it's not broken, but we have to put ice on it. This should still be filled out. We're not necessarily looping in the DS for something like that, but we do want to make sure that we notify the parents and the lead supervisor, so myself, and things like that. So that's an important part of this process as well. The consequences of abuse are listed in part 5, but here are just a couple of them. So the CPNP will lead an investigation. So this is not an investigation that I will lead or your lead pastor will lead, which these are professionals, so that's a good thing. And the person who is subject to abuse be taken out of abuse report. So the abuser needs to be taken out of ministry leadership immediately. And then the pastor, so myself, I will work with the family to determine the pastoral care plan long-term with them. So let's talk about additional trainings. So the education does not end here. This is not the only time that you are going to be doing this training. This is something that you're going to be doing forever, as long as you're working with children and youth and vulnerable adults. So every 2 years that we'll review this policy, as well as the other trainings that we listed. So the other couple things that you need to do, so you've watched this video, which congratulations for getting through this. You've watched this video. There are a couple other things that you need to do to be safe sanctuary trained. So this is not the only thing that you have to do. So if we were in person, we would have case studies, but let me walk you through a couple things. So we have 3 more documents that you need to look at. These are all on the online campus. It should be outlined for you, but if you cannot find these 3 documents, please let me know, because you need to have filled out these 3 documents in order to be complete. We have the Safe Sanctuary quiz. We have a form. You'll see this as a breeze form, but this is what the PDF looks like. You're not being graded on this. This is just to help you think through some of the things that you've learned. But I want you to, go through this, and you can take this as a group, or you can take this one-on-one. That's fine. Okay. You will also have safe sanctuary case study scenarios. There's about 3 on the breeze form if you're doing this online. And you're just going to type what you think you would do in that scenario, or what you think the appropriate call is. Again, you're not being graded. This is just to help you think through in real time how to apply this training. And then the last thing, once you've completed those 2 things and turn them in, they go directly to me. You will then sign this form that you also have access to. You'll remember that one of the requirements to be a volunteer is saying that you will abide by the requirements of the policy. And so this helps us know that you're saying, yes, not only have I learned about the policy, but I will abide by it. That's what you're saying here. So, all right, that concludes our Safe Sanctuary training for 2024. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Always, always, always ask your pastor if you have questions. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about anything, and continue to do such a great job in ministry. All right, thank you.